You're watching HCAM's Government Channel, where we provide coverage of the latest meetings and events happening in Hingham's local government. For more Hingham news, tune into HCAM's public channel on Comcast 97 and Verizon Fios 31, and educational channel on Comcast 22 and Verizon Fios 29.
In 2017, we're calling a meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order. We have a few preliminary items, and then we will open it up to the advisory committee as well as the school committee. First, item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of January 12, 2017 as amended.
So moved, Paul. Paul, these were just a couple edits I made to the minutes.
Yeah, you know about them anyhow.
I think you saw, I sent them in about a week ago.
Yeah, just give me a second.
Sure.
While we're waiting, public comment, anybody have anything that they'd like to say? When the school department budget presentation opens up, I'll have a few preliminary comments, but this is generally the time in our meeting when anybody wants to make a statement, they can. All right, I don't see anybody.
I will second that motion.
Okay,
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, first item on the agenda, insurance recovery, South School, Article U. Tom? Where's Tom?
Those are the insurance recovery articles.
Certainly, certainly.
I'd like to call the advisory committee meeting to order, please.
And I will call the school committee meeting to order, 7:11 p.m.
Thank you.
All right, welcome colleagues, fellow residents. Okay, first matter on the agenda, Article U,
Just
Insurance
the two
Recovery
insurance
East School.
Hi, John.
John Ferris, Legal Department. There's Article U is a insurance recovery article for, back in 2015, we had some damage to the sun reflector shades on the east school. We have received a recovery from insurance in the amount of $24,022 for that project. That project is now currently under procurement, and we anticipate that it will be done during the April timeframe or perhaps a little bit earlier. So the law for insurance recoveries has since changed to $150,000, but since we received the money prior to the law changing, it's a good idea that we vote to have that money transferred back to the school department budget for 2017.
Jim, anything you want to add?
Yeah, Linda, do you have anything to add to that?
I don't. I think John covered it all.
Any questions from the members of the advisory committee? Great.
Well, in that case,
I do have just one comment for advisory. I do realize that we're already corrected.
Linda, you got to go to the mic.
This one here. It's just a second.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that wish to speak later on in the course of the meeting, you have to go to the mic so that those watching at home will be able to pick up any comments you choose to make. So thank you. Okay, I'll entertain a motion for favorable action on Article U.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Next, Article V, Mr. Ferris.
Similar to Article U, Article V is also a housekeeping article that we do every year with the insurance recovery account that was previously set at $20,000. That was for a crack that we had in the South School boiler. We had a crack last winter in 2016. That job has actually been completed this summer in 2017, and the insurance settlement for that was $43,534.61. We've paid the bill, and school department is requesting this article to transfer the money back to the 2017 operating budget.
Questions from my colleagues? Advisory Committee.
Any questions?
I'll entertain a motion to approve favorable action on Article V as it relates to South School.
So moved.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
I will entertain a motion on Article U that the town transfer $24,022 from the receipts reserved for appropriation fund in excess of $20,000 for use by the school department.
Second.
Jim, a question on that. Do we have to specify which fiscal year? Do we need to specify in the motion what fiscal year we're transferring it to?
You know, I believe we should, Victor. So I'll actually make a modified motion that the town transfer $24,022 for fiscal year 17 from the receipts reserved for appropriation fund. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Great. I'll also entertain a motion on Article V, that the town transfer $43,534.61 for fiscal year 17 from the receipts reserved for appropriation fund. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, at this time,
Paul, before you go into the school stuff, you have a couple of liquor licenses that there might be people here for.
all right. All right, okay.
I thought the coordinator one too.
All right, we'll do some quick votes here, folks. I'll entertain a motion to appoint Tom Mayo as the ADA coordinator for the town of Hingham.
So moved.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Entertain a motion to waive the gas inspection fee at the GAR Hall.
So moved. I just make a point for the audience that inspection and building permit fees for town-owned facilities are typically waived,
Right.
since what we'd essentially be doing is kind of taking money out of one pocket of the town coffers and putting it in the other. So I'll make that motion.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Entertain a motion to approve the issuance of a special one-day wine and malt beverages license to South Shore Snap for the Slapshot 40th Anniversary fundraiser to be held at Reebok CrossFit Bear Cove on March 2nd, 2017, from 6:30 to 9:30 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
All's in favor? Aye. Entertain a motion to approve the issuance of a special one-day wine and malt beverages license at South Shore Snap for St. Patrick's Day Social to be held at the Hingham Community Center on March 18, 2017, from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m.
I'll let you do that one.
So moved.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Entertain a motion to approve the issuance of a special one-day wine and malt beverages license to Vicki Dreyfos for a bar mitzvah reception to be held at the Congregation Sherei Shalom on March 18, 2017, from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
All's in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. Now we will start with the joint session with the Advisory Committee and the School Committee, school budget presentation. I should say preliminarily, the board has received some correspondence from residents in the town with respect to special needs education request. I anticipate that the school committee will entertain questions, and if during the course of the meeting you wish to speak, I would ask that you raise your hand or recognize anybody that wants to speak, come to the microphone. You know, we live in a town where the discourse is courteous. This venue is no exception. I realize that people can be passionate about positions, and sometimes, you know, they can get a little carried away, but you know what? We're all here working as one, so if that happens, I'll gently speak to it, and if it persists, I'll be a little more forceful. So with that, Dr. Gallo, welcome.
Welcome,
School
Doc.
Committee, Advisory Committee, thank you all for the work that you're doing. I don't know what Mr. Ferris is doing at the moment, but I believe
some
he's
magic.
trying to do the PowerPoint. which-
Paul, while he's doing that, would you mind if I made a brief statement on behalf of the
Absolutely,
advisory?
James.
So just for folks to know, the advisory committee also is hard to work on the budget as well. We've gone through a process of looking at the municipal side budget. We have a subcommittee, the Advisory Committee Education Subcommittee, that is working very hard with the school department and school committee to review the budget, to ask questions and to learn more about the details. The advisory committee plans to take up the vote on the school committee budget towards the end of February. So this is one of many opportunities that the advisory committee has to dig in deeper into the budget and to ask questions. So thank you very much again for being here.
I believe Liza would like to make some comments.
Well, thank you for having us here tonight.
Pleasure.
We received the school department's proposed budget in the end of December, and we have had 4 working sessions to get through the details and talk a little bit ourselves, and for the 7 of us to ask administration some further questions. So that's where we are at this point. We are still working very hard on it and getting through it, but from where we are today, we want Dr. Gallo to take you through it, and I'd also like to take the opportunity, John Ferris, our business manager, is here earlier on camera, but we have a new assistant superintendent, Dr. James LaVillois, we call him Jamie.
Welcome.
And so we were very fortunate to have him join us from Norwell. Ellen Keene retired, and so he's been a great addition to our team, and we're really excited to have him. And he's here for his first Hingham Selectmen's meeting tonight. So on that note, Dr.
Hope we
Gallo-
don't disappoint.
Dr. Gallo will take it away and do her magic presentation of the budget.
Thank you. So a number of you in the room have seen most of the slides that I'm going to show tonight. It's really a compilation of the slides that we used in the first 3 budget hearings that we had on January 5th, January 12th, January 19th, and we will be using the presentation that reflects what is the school administration's recommended preliminary budget to the school committee. So the school committee has not yet adopted this budget. They began a discussion of it last Thursday night on the 26th, and we'll be ending the slides with where we are now, because while we're using the original slides for our proposal, we have made some adjustments along the way, and so we will end up with a slide that summarizes those. So there are always challenges, as you can imagine, in any given year when we begin to put together a budget. We always start, as you know, with looking at the school mission, having a planning session among the school committee members to get some ideas that we would want to move forward in terms of priorities. We always adopt budget guidelines and budget assumptions, but these are some of the special comments for this year. In special education, the overall budget is up slightly. However, the net tuitions are down, and that's a function mainly of an increased circuit breaker offset that we have for this year. State aid, we've been assuming to be fairly level. We've heard just within the last week or so that we have some additional state aid, and in fact, as of last night, I believe that Ted has incorporated that anticipated increase for the town, which is about $200,000 into the forecast for revenue. However, there are still some concerns on the part of educators and some of the legislators as well, that even though there is increased funding for education, about $20 per student, that falls well short of what the Foundation Commission that did its work about 2 years ago, well short of what that recommended needed to be added into the state budget. We have only a few anticipated retirements this year. At the time of this writing, 3 teachers. There are now 4 teachers and 3 administrators, and those replacement costs are budgeted as we anticipate there would be savings or not. Leave of absence, that's always one of the points in our budget that is kind of an unknown until March 1st, but there are 14 full-year leaves of absence, teachers this year that are out on leave, and when we create the budget, we need to be conservative and make the assumption that all of them will come back, and sometimes they don't. We don't know that final count until March 1st, although we do know what's happening with some of those folks. But that can be a big swing in our budget, because typically when a teacher takes a full year leave, the person replacing that teacher for the year is at a lower salary, and so if all of them don't come back, there is some savings, and we can make an adjustment in the budget as we go along. Collective bargaining, most of you are aware that we have 6 collective bargaining units. We have the teachers, the administrators, small unit that includes assistant principals and directors. We have para-educators, and then as well, we have bus drivers, custodians, bus drivers and maintenance, bus drivers, custodians, and maintenance and food services, and all of them have expiring contracts at the end of this year, so we're in the process of beginning negotiations. Quite a time-consuming and lengthy process, as you can imagine. And then overall enrollment, it doesn't show up very well on that slide, but we expect it to be fairly level with the elementary down. I'll show you some slides on that in a minute. With the middle school down a little bit, and with the high school up a fair amount. So overall, relatively level, at least in terms of the way that we project, which is very conservatively in terms of enrollment. So we had hoped, and we've hoped for many years, that the kindergarten enrollment, which tends to bounce around a lot, would settle down when we move to the full-day program. But in fact, so far, it hasn't. So this slide shows that very well, in that in 15-16, when we had our first year of full-year kindergarten, we had 303 students. In the current year, we have 275 students. So in fact, we have 2 fewer sections of kindergarten this year than we did last year. So if you look at the bouncing about, it makes it kind of hard to predict exactly how many students there will be for next year. We took the number in the middle. So we are projecting that there are 275, will be 290 students. That's our projection, not on the slide yet, for what we hope will be our enrollment next year. And so we're looking at the likelihood of needing 1 more teacher, if in fact we have 290 students. That 1 more teacher is in our budget, but the cost is offset by the tuitions that parents will pay, because we are not changing our tuition-based program, at least for the coming year. And in fact, the other night, the school committee did vote to increase the tuition for that program by 2%, and that will be in the numbers that go out to parents next week. I think sometime we begin our actual enrollment. Total district enrollment, you can see, has declined a little bit. In the current year, we're at 4252, and this is the in-district enrollment. This does not count the preschool students, does not count out-of-district students, and it does not count vocational students. So down a little bit, 216, 4252, that's the current year, and we expect that to be fairly level. So we've leveled off over quite a lengthy period of increase. We had been increasing in the range of 50 to 60 students a year, and because the elementary has leveled off, that being mainly a function of smaller kindergarten and first grade classes coming in than the 5th grade classes that are going off to the middle school. Elementary enrollments, and this is 1 to 5, because you've already seen the kindergarten one. So you can see if we go back to, I can't see it on my screen, what's the first year, John, on the chart? Excuse me? 8-9. Okay, that 8-9 was the year before East School opened. We had pretty sharp growth there, and that had been projected at the time we were doing the last master plan, that we would continue to grow in enrollment, and then we have declined since then. There'll be a slight decline again in the coming year projected. Middle school and high school enrollments are both on this slide. And you can see that the high school is the one on top in the blue, continuing to grow, and the middle school, The peak enrollment at the middle school is really right now, as we have all 3 classes in the middle school, well over 300 students, and those students are moving on. We're continuing to have 300-plus enrollments in most of the elementary grades, but not in kindergarten. And again, we're projecting high school to be up a fair amount next year, and that's a function of the 300-plus students are moving into the high school, and the graduating classes are getting a bit larger. Graduating classes have been under 300 students, and they're approaching that now, and so we'll have a larger high school enrollment for a number of years to come. This chart may be a little hard to understand, but back when we had only the part-day kindergarten, we had not only a lot of variation from year to year in what happened with kindergarten, but we had a lot of variation in terms of what happened with grade 1. Because in fact, a number of students entered grade 1 with us rather than entering at kindergarten. Now, some of that is simply a function of people moving into town when their children are ready to go to school. Some of that is a function of the fact that a number of families sent their children to a full-day private kindergarten and then came back to us in the first grade. And you can see there that if you go back to a year like 2012-13, we had a small kindergarten of 266 children, and in fact, 67 children entered Hingham for their first grade year. That's a big percentage of the class, making for a grade 1 class of the total of 266 and the 67. As recently as 14-15, 61 children entered first grade in Hingham, and they joined a class of 295 kids who came here for kindergarten. So we have been thinking that with the full day, that gap, or that bump we called it, the K to 1 bump, will lessen. And certainly in the first year of kindergarten, 15-16, we did see a lessening of that. So in this year's first grade, we picked up only 21 students who were not here with us for kindergarten. And that's a good thing, because it means all of our children, the majority of our children, have the same educational base entering first grade. It was very challenging when we had 67 youngsters coming in that went to school somewhere else. So this is really a good thing for us, and particularly a good thing for children. The next year, we don't yet know what that grade 1 bump up will be. I'm thinking that it is going to be smaller than it has been, but I wouldn't attempt to predict what that number would be, just that it will be smaller. So we do our projections in a very simplistic way. When we're looking for enrollment projections for things such as developing a new master plan or a major building project or something of that sort, we contract out for a demographer to come in and look at lots and lots of factors, not just how children move along from one grade to the other. But such people would come in and look at things like building starts and kinds of housing that are available, and birth rates, both in Hingham and elsewhere in certain years. And it would be a very complete projection for a multiple year period. But when we're projecting simply for knowing how many classrooms we need in the coming year, we project very simply, because it's a one-year only thing. And essentially what we do is we guesstimate what kindergarten is going to be. So this year we said we think 290, because kindergarten seems to be still bouncing along. And then, so we guesstimate the kindergarten with the best information we have. We do have a little information that comes from Town Hall. Most families, not all, but most families do complete the census form that Irene McCracken does send along. So we have a sense of how many people are saying that they have children that age at that point. Not all of those children go to kindergarten. Not all of them may come to our kindergarten, so it's not totally accurate, but we have a little information about that. And then we simply move children along from one grade to the next, except that at the K to 1 bump, we used to have to look at the past history for 3 years and guess what that would be. Now we're guessing still at what that bump will be, but a much smaller number. And then we moved children along. We moved them from 5th grade into 6th grade. And so using that basis, and we don't consider in and out migration in these projections. But in fact, and that's why I say they're conservative, but in fact, we do have in and out migration. And in fact, most of our migration over the years, as the children are in school, is an in-migration net rather than an out migration. So you can see doing that for K to 5, we come up with an expectation of 1,881 students, which is down 49 students over what we have this year. However, I don't think it's going to be down 49 students because people will move in or out, and the people who move in, the net will be a greater number. For grade 6 through 8, there's the move from 5th grade to 6th grade at the middle school, but then there's the out move of 8th graders to the high school. In the last several years, most of you are aware that some of the parochial high schools, if not all of them, have started accepting children at grade 7 as well as at grade 9. And so we don't believe that more children are going to private school as a result. So we split the difference. We take what we thought would be the total number who do go out for high school, and we divided it in half. And so we're making an assumption here that 20 students who would be 7th graders with us will go to Notre Dame, BC High, Xaverian, those sorts of schools. And that 20 will go to the out at 9th grade as well to private schools. It's been kind of a traditional number forever in Hingham. So we move those other students around. So doing that, we would be down 29 based on that simple projection at the middle school next year. And there will be other in and out migration. We get a fair number of students each year from schools like Derby or St. Paul's that come to us from often at the middle school or at grade 9. So high school, take the 8th graders, move them along, take out the graduates, the students we intend to, that we expect to graduate, and those that we expect to go to private school, and we end up with 1,262. That's up 44 students over what we have now at the high school. So it's a very simplistic way to do it, but in all, we come up with 4,210 that are projected for next year. We do our enrollment checks monthly. And this is the chart that we use. So in the left-hand corner, we have the middle school. Total now is 1096. We use December. For the year-to-year comparisons, the prior slides that we do, we always use the October 1 count so that we're comparing apples with apples. And so those prior charts were based upon October 1. For the purpose of our projection, we use December 1 because we want to use the most recent available data for projecting how many students will be added to that number. So 1096 in our middle school, 1218 in the high school, 1,930 students in the elementary, and that's a total for us of 4244 as of December 1. We also have 72 children in our, at that point, I think we have 74 now, but at that point, 72 children in our preschool, and that's a combination of children who were there with an IEP and also typical children whose parents pay a tuition for them to be there as well. That's the total of 74. And then we have 51 students who are students with special needs who are in an out-of-district placement, and we have 4 students who are in a vocational program. So, I'm trying to control my computer, which I can see, because I can't see that screen, and this one with this. So we have the same picture on both. So we were asked to produce this year a level services budget, and we did that. We believe that that's what we did, and we were asked also to indicate some other things that we thought were needs and warranted, and they would go on to a separate list with other town departments who've listed things that they think are important to have, but they are not built into the budget at this point. So pay attention to the green, because the green is what is in the budget and part of what we believe to be a level services budget. So we're calling that the base budget, but it does have some new things in it. I'm going to talk about them in a minute. And then anything in blue on the next chart does reflect what we think is something that's needed. To request for something new, something that we think that is needed, but is not included in the figures at this point. And the blue things are those things that we would ask you to add to the list of things that the other departments have also requested as things that they need and think would improve their program, but are not currently in their budget. There are some other things that we think can be justified, absolutely justified, but we are not recommending this at this time simply because there are higher priorities. So, moving to the next slide then, and I apologize that the projection capability is not very good here for those of you in the audience. Not something we can control, but I do understand that it's challenging. So this next sheet looks like it has more new things than there really are. Because if you look at this sheet carefully, those of you on the boards who have the PowerPoint presentation, there are column headings and then column entries. So in fact, and you have green on the left side of your chart, so in fact, there are 8 items that are new that we think fit the definition of level services. And of those 8, there are 3 that are somewhat unique and that I think you really could take off of this list. They're in the budget, but I think that you could, when you hear about them, they're not really things that I think are anything more than a unique or one-time change. So I'll go over those. NEASC, New England Association of Schools and Colleges, our high school, is accredited by NEASC, and next September we will have a team coming from NEASC, a team of educators who will be in town for 3 days for the site visit for that accreditation. It's a 10-year process. In the 2 years leading up to the actual site visit, there's a self-study going on. High school has been working on that self-study. It's very comprehensive. Takes virtually all of our professional development time for a period of 2 years. So the cost here includes 2 things. One is housing for 13 members of a team who will come here. We have to provide their housing and food from roughly Sunday noon until Wednesday at 3 or 4 p.m. There's another smaller piece of that cost that is in the year of the accreditation visit. We have to pay a double dues payment to NEASC for the materials that they provide as part of the self-study and the visit. So that's a one-time thing. Happens every 10 years. It's a one-time event. And so it really doesn't constitute, in my mind, it doesn't really fit level services, if you will, because it only happens once, but it also does not constitute something that would increase the budget beyond just this 1 year. The second thing that I want to talk about is if you go partway down the list, and to the R2700 account, that's the counseling account. We are fortunate in this part of the state to have 2 institutions, 2 what are called recovery high schools. They're high schools specifically designed for children that have a substance abuse issue. It's a wonderful resource. They're moderate in cost, and we're really lucky to have places that children that have need in that area can go. they're only a couple of years old, and we've only in the last 2 years had students attend them, and typically it may be only one student a year. So we were challenged when we had our first student and got the bill for that institution. It's $10,000, which is very moderate tuition for a high school program. And so at the time, we charged it and had it as part of the special ed budget. Well, it doesn't belong in the special ed budget. These aren't necessarily children that have special needs. So we need to put it more appropriately where it belongs. So we're mentioning it here because we put it into the guidance or the counseling budget, but it's really not a new item. We've been paying for a student. I think we've had one student in each of the last 3 years. So it's there as if it were a new initiative. It's a fairly new initiative, but it's not an additional cost over what we have been paying, just paying it from a different account. And the third thing that I want to mention as being different is which one of these things? Well, we'll go back and perhaps the additional kindergarten teacher. I mentioned that if we have 290 students, we'll likely need another section of kindergarten. That most likely would be either at Plymouth River, which has only 3 sections this year, or at East, which similarly has 3 sections. But the cost of that additional kindergarten teacher would be met by the additional tuitions that we would collect. So it's here because we've increased the number of teachers, but it's totally offset. So it's not an additional cost to this budget. So of the 8 things that are new, that accounts for 3 of them. So moving on to the others, going back near the top of the list. The R2300, we requested this last year. We made a change in the graduation requirement at the high school, more phys ed instruction and more health instruction. But as well, the high school enrollment has increased by about 169 students over 5 years. And during that time, we have not added any teaching increase in phys ed. We still have only 2 phys ed teachers at Hingham High School with over 1,200 students. And we haven't added any more health instruction. So this is a matter of a graduation requirement, but also an enrollment-related need. So that's why we've put it under the level services budget and under our definition of level services. If you move down to the next thing in green, this is simply a matter of we have more students this year in Chinese 1 and Chinese 2 than we think we can accommodate with the 6/10 person that we have there now. Now, we could be wrong about that when the initial tallies come out, and the tallies are the lists of counts of what children actually select for next year. It could be that we don't need to increase the 6/10 teacher to a full-time role, or not, but we've budgeted it there because we know we have children that would like to move through the sequence and take the full sequence of Chinese courses. That varies a lot. It's our 4th language, and so it's often hard to predict because for many students it's a 2nd language, and they may choose not to go to Chinese 2. They may choose to take woodworking or some other course that we offer. So that's the reason that one is there. Last year, we asked for some technology support, and I really would probably better call it technical support than technology support. We have, fortunately, a fair supply of technology in all of our buildings, but particularly in the elementary buildings. We've added to that technology over the past few years, one primary reason being that online testing is coming. In the coming year, for the first time, we'll do MCAS 2, and we are expected by DESE, and we agreed with that expectation. We're testing grades 4 and 8 this year online, and we've been working toward the eventual day, which is likely to be in the next year, which would be this budget year, of testing all of our students online. So in readiness for that, we now have Chromebooks and iPads, and we have laptops in some cases, and every elementary school has a beautiful lab. But we have 4 sections of most grades in each of the buildings. And so with all of this equipment, we do have a technology specialist in each building, but that person teaches. And in a building where we have 24 sections of something, K to 5, that means 24 classes of students that are coming each week. And it is increasingly difficult with the numbers of devices that we have for the technology teacher to take care of them and keep them up to date and make sure that they're working and make sure that when a class arrives to the lab or when a class arrives for testing, that somebody can take care of any issues. We requested that we hire 1 full-time technician that would be shared among the 4 elementary schools. And last year we made that request and we had to withdraw it at the end because of funding. We're making it again this year, even more important this year because we know that the testing will be here the year that's this spring for grades 4 and 8, and then beginning next year for all grades. So we think that we can't continue to provide the level of service that we provide without help in setting up the new devices, adding the apps to the kindergarten iPads and all of that. So that's there again. We did the tuitions. We are in the second year of what was a 2-year plan to be sure that the 2 nurses that we have, 2 RNs at the high school and 2 at the middle school, are not only RNs, but are also DESC licensed as teachers. And that is an expectation of the Department of Public Health. And we moved one of our RNs who was not DESC certified to have that license as well last year, and we need to do the second one this year. And so the cost that we have there for doing that is the net between what the pay would be for the nurse with both licenses versus the person that is an RN that we've been very happy with for a number of years, who has been paid as a para. So it's part 2 of a necessary change. Doesn't give us any additional skill level. I mean, an RN is an RN, and they've done a wonderful job, but the DESC the DESC certification is another set of expectations. And then the new maintenance person. We lost a maintenance person when we opened East School. That was 2009-10. And over time, really were able to recover most everything that we lost in that transition. Remember what the economy was like in 2009 and 2010. And over the years, we've been able to restore to full-time the elementary assistant principals, the adjustment counselors, and so many other things. This is the one remaining thing. And the argument could be made, well, gee, this is level services budget. You've been living without this person, and this person is a maintenance person that would mainly be involved in fields work. But you could make the argument, you've been living without this all these years, this is level services, and therefore, can't you do without this person? Well, we can do without lots of things, but I would make the case here that we have 2 compelling reasons that, despite the fact we've asked many times and we weren't able to fund it, the 2 compelling reasons are, this is a fields-based person. Number 1, we have brand-new fields opening at the middle school. And those of you who've been in town for a while know that middle school field prior didn't get much maintenance, couldn't really help with much maintenance because it was just kind of a rocky, hard substance for surface. But we have 2 brand-new fields. They have a nicely groomed infields. We have a sprinkler system. We have a pump. That needs maintenance. We have a screen that goes up and down. And so that's a brand-new function that we need. And we have one person right now that deals with our fields across town, spending most of the time at the high school, but we simply can't extend that person to care for that. And even more important, we at the moment are trying to bring all 4 of our elementary schools up to ADA compliance with respect to the fields, and part of that means maintaining what we have in a better fashion, and at least in the short term, it also means maintaining the wood chip kind of surface that we have to make sure that there is wheelchair access to all of the equipment. That is the requirement. And again, during the day at the elementary schools, we have one custodian, so we can't expect that custodian to take on the additional outside duties. So while we have wanted this rollback for a lot of time, there are 2 new circumstances this year that are, I think, add legitimacy to that, that request. And can't see that. Is that the last green one? Okay, so 8 in all. 3 of them, I think we can make the case are just, they are what they are, but they really don't add to the budget except for NEASC in this 1 year. And the others we have, in most cases, talked about before. Thanks. So, when all is said and done, we have a budget that looks like that, and people in the audience have this budget. This is the overall budget, divided into 3 sections here. The top, which is in the black, is the regular education portion of the budget, and as originally proposed, that increase is 6.03%. Now remember, we made some adjustments. I'm going to show those at the end, but when we started out, 6.03 in the regular education, 4.23 in special education, and then the very small budget down at the bottom, which is the vocational budget, and that is
6.99.
6.99, thanks. Okay, and overall, right, 5.6, thanks, John. The overall at that point was 5.26. And looking at it from a pie chart perspective, you can see the big blue chunk there, piece of the pie, which is a little over $26 million, is regular instruction. Now, these are just budget categories, program categories, so when I say regular instruction, that doesn't mean teachers. That means all the things that have to do with the regular instruction program. And over on the right-hand side, the piece of the pie that looks about a quarter, because it is 24% of the budget, 11,900,000+, that is the special education budget. So that's the pink that was on the prior chart. And then all these other little pieces of the pie are quite a bit smaller. The excuse me, custodial, maintenance, utilities, all of the business functions, that's about 4.2 million, and that's the green piece of the pie. And then the pieces get smaller, all the way over to the far left. You can barely see it. There's a little kind of pale green slice of the pie, and that's that small vocational budget, which for next year is 79,730 students. I think that represents 3 students, and then one of those students has a special need, and therefore there's a vocational schools will often charge a supplement for that. So it's really 3 students, but an additional cost for one of them. So this one does show you the personnel. So there are 3 categories here. The tall blue bars are personnel in each of the years. 217, 218 is furthest to the left, and that's the projected budget for next year. And 216, 217 in the middle, that's our current budget. And then 250 and 216 goes back 2 years from the projection. So personnel is in the blue, contracts, and that wouldn't be the personnel contracts, but other kinds of contracts that we have, like transportation bus lease, that kind of thing. And then all the other things are the little green bar. So if you think about it, personnel costs are personnel costs. They are what they are. They reflect mainly contractual agreements with individuals or with bargaining groups. The contracts, they are what they are. They're contracts that have to do with fuel and costs and utilities and those kinds of things. And then everything else is the green. The problem is that the everything else is really the flexibility that we have in the budget, because there are some things in the everything else that we might be able to reduce, like textbooks or supplies or that kind of thing. But you can see there's not a lot of flexibility if you look at the green pieces. Also, you can see that the green pieces are fairly level from one of the budget years to the next, and the contracts, the reddish pieces, are fairly level. However, the personnel pieces, and remember the projected year is the one to the left, are increasing. And you've heard all of us say, and certainly heard all of you say, that we have a real concern about sustainability of the personnel costs. I would say as well, however, when you look at that, you think, oh my goodness, we must have far more people in the year we're projecting than we had in 15-16, and that isn't the case. It isn't that the number of people is growing at an unsustainable rate. It's that the personnel costs are growing, and those are two different things. So this next section of slides, these are slides from the presentation that John did, and at the end when we do questions, John is here and can answer them for you. But these have to do with all of the business operations and the services and the facilities that we have. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly because some of these are simply notes, and those of you who have the need to know on these sections have the PowerPoint things. But you know, it all started with planning meeting and the initiatives that we had on a grand scale about facilities, the state of the plant facilities. In this set of slides, there is an update on current activities, and then the actual budget requests, and we're going to focus here on the budget requests. I do have some slides at the end about capital requests, but we met last night with capital outlays, so I don't think we need to go over those at this time in the interest of time. So these are budget trends going from, from 12-13 to the left, 16-17, and then a budget prediction. So the green there are facilities and operations, and of course those costs would go up over time, as you might expect, just as they do in your homes. The blue are school committee and administration parts of the budget, and those are the kind of royal blue color. They haven't changed much over time. The red are health and student activities. You know, they're fairly stable, although projected to go up for next time, and that's mainly a function of things like the nurse and also the teacher, half-time health teacher, half-time phys ed teacher. Then the facilities and operations, which are a big chunk of the budget, and then our regular transportation. And actually, it looks like that's kind of going down. I'll talk about transportation in a minute because, of course, we have all the new buses this year and kind of a different way of doing things like maintenance. Whoops. We have aging infrastructure, as you're well aware. East School is 10 years old now. High school doesn't seem possible, but that renovation and major addition are going into 18 years. We have a roof that needs repair and is getting repair. There's an insurance component for that. Foster is our oldest school. most in need of something, renovation, new school, we don't know at this point, but we're having ongoing issues with some of the original equipment. School that served us well from 1954. The fact we have original piping in there, and aging steam boilers, and the original electrical board, all of which are important because many of these things cannot be easily replaced or even easily repaired. So that's something on our agenda we have to think about, both in the current years, until we can do something major there, and then for the future as well. Plymouth River, window projects still needed there. East Middle School and High School, elevators are a big issue in our state. There are only a few elevator inspectors. They tend to be very rigid, and the codes change constantly. And something I learned when we built East School was, who would ever think that an elevator has a 1-year warranty? My God, you can buy a coffee maker that has a warranty that's more than 1 year. So elevator costs are always an issue for us for any variety of reasons. And then we have properties at the depot that are, challenging for us and also for the town, because there are many decisions about the big projects coming forward for both the town and the school that are kind of jointly interrelated. So I'm not going to spend any time on any of them, but those are some of our big concerns. By that one. So maintenance and custodial needs, the 1.0 maintenance person we need. We think that we can get along with the staffing that we have for maintenance and custodial in other areas. We have aging infrastructure again. We have, oh, I'm sorry, I'm trying to do two things at the same time here. Okay. Catching up on deferred maintenance, we have a wonderful new individual, Doug Foley, who started with us last year, done a tremendous job at putting in place preventive maintenance programs, dealing with things that had been deferred for a number of years, and so that whole department, custodial and maintenance, has been reorganized, and between Katie Hartman, who's our custodial supervisor, and Doug Foley, who is our procurement officer, things are really doing very, very well in that area. Another point that John made when we did this is that, we all like to think that we can live within 2%, but very clearly in the area of things like HVAC and elevators and electrical and plumbing, those kinds of costs do not go up at 2%. And they're the kinds of trades that we absolutely need, and we have to pay whatever the market brings us. John has very complicated ways of forecasting energy, and in this presentation he had things about counting degree days and all of that, and that's all important, but I'm not going to talk about it here. But we do have to look at degree days. We have to look at seasonal adjustments. We have to look at the fact that when we have a new facility, we don't have a track record, and it takes a couple of years to come up with what the pattern would be for that, and that's particularly the case of the middle school. We have to look at the severity of the winter. 2015 was a tough winter. We don't know what this year will bring, but lots of things that you have to do to forecast the needs that we have. We have to make some assumptions about what the costs will be for heating oil and for electricity. I'll give this to you, because I can't and talk as well. So electricity being up, imagine how many kilowatt hours we actually use, and so you make an assumption, and you don't have to be off by a lot for it to be a very, very big number. So overall, energy in the projected budget is up about $33,000. So in facilities and operations, we're talking about electricity, heat, utilities, which is water, maintenance, and custodial services. They're all part of what we call the facilities and operations. And the 217, 218, the forecasted year, is the one furthest to the right. So custodial services would be the tallest bar, of course, because those are people. Maintenance, smaller number of maintenance folks that we have, and then the utilities. Heat is the greenish bar, and electricity is the darker red. So you can see they're up some, but, you know, not really an unusual increase. For those of you who have the PowerPoints, John has also provided oil, both in terms of usage and the cost trend, so you can get a sense, because two things are happening there. Costs depend upon how much you use and also what the price is at the time, and those aren't both linear kinds of increases. And then there's another one with natural gas, which has the same idea. The usage is there, but also the cost. And those fluctuate widely, as you can imagine, with markets.
And weather.
Yeah, markets and weather, absolutely, thank you. And then the same thing for electricity, usage and cost are both there. Transportation, so far, we think we have a real success in terms of transportation. Prior years, we had what's called a full-service lease, so we lease the buses. We provide our own drivers. We've always provided our own drivers, but prior to this year, we leased buses, and included in that was a spare bus that sat here, a person that came to the bus depot every morning to make sure all the buses got started, the routine kinds of maintenance, such as oil changes and tire changes, and then any other kinds of maintenance that we had. It was full service. Our lease was up, and we looked at renewing that kind of lease, and the cost, we felt, was extraordinary. So we looked at other options, and so now our new option is we still lease the buses, and we still have buses that are spares, but we provide those other things, like the person that's there every morning to make sure the buses start, like some of the routine maintenance. We have provisions in our plan for other kinds of maintenance where we contract out, and we've given our transportation supervisor, Patrick Cunningham, some new responsibilities. He also manages the bus depot for the town over at the ammunition depot. And so that budget is pretty flat. We don't have actual data because we don't have a complete year, so we don't have that to go by, but things are in good shape. There was an additional cost that is due to having an additive, is it, that's in the diesel fuel?
Diesel fuel additive.
Right, and then Patrick has some added responsibilities. Next year we'll have better information because we'll have a whole year under our belt. Everything's going smoothly. And we've had good cooperation working with the town, because they have some facilities that we don't have, and also with these contracted individuals or groups that we work with. So at this point, good news story. 22 brand new buses, that's a great thing for us and for kids, and
At lower cost than the previous year.
at a lower cost, right. And that's really, really important. A year ago, we would have been looking at a much bigger transportation budget if we had continued with the old lease. We have 2 cameras now on each bus. The cameras are largely a function of a grant that we got, or we thought we had, that we lost in the 9C state cuts. But in any event, we have the buses, the cameras, and they are on the buses.
And GPS.
And GPS as well.
Know where the buses are at all times.
John said we know where the buses are at all times, so I
How
won't...
fast they're going and everything about the buses.
And everything about the buses. All right, thank you. So, special ed budget, we did that presentation on the 19th of January. So moving along quickly, that's now the pink part. a pink part, John. Thank you. So we're in the pink section of the budget, and that's the one that started out as 4.23%. And there are 8 separate functions of that budget. We went over them all. Here's a pie chart that shows that budget. So there are 61% of it, the bigger blue area there is teaching services. And tuitions are the purple part of the budget. That they are down this year, and that's a little over $3 million. The transportation is there in the green, and that does include the transportation responsibility we have for vocational. We don't separate it out. That's a fairly small amount. Sometimes there's a bus that children can get to a vocational school, and sometimes parents or students drive and we reimburse. And then there are counseling and psychological services that are also in that part of the budget. So that's how it looks broken down into the component parts. This is just a snapshot, and I say snapshot because special ed enrollment can change from one day to the next. Not necessarily because children move in or out, but because children may be put on an IEP. That could happen at any point during the year, or they may come off, and that could happen at any point, as well as the move-ins and outs. So we have 557 total individual ed plans, 557 students, and that is comprised of 506 students who are educated every day in our school, and 51 students who are in an out-of-district setting. 51 is down significantly from 5-6 years ago when we had numbers. One year we were budgeting for 66 students, one year for 60, and so there are 51 students currently. And then there are the enrollments by building, both for and by level, both for the students that are in district and those who are out of district. This is a different look at the same kind of information, but with the percentage. Our percentage of students on IEPs tends to be on the lower side of the state average. This chart shows the students by disability type, and the first slide there is by their primary disability. We have only a certain number of categories that we can give for a primary disability, although many of our children have disabilities in a number of areas. And so these are the students who are served in district, and the taller blue bar there are learning disabilities, 179 students whose primary diagnosis, and this is a state term, is learning disability. Obviously covers a whole range of different kinds of disabilities that could be in there. The next biggest category, the 92, are children that have some health disabilities, and going down, the next biggest category is 73, that's the reddish bar, communications, and often that's the younger children that have communications, and then smaller numbers for each. But all of those children are in our classes every day, and the majority of those children are included in a regular class every day. A small number of the children would be in one of our sub-separate classes, but the majority of those students, 506 students, are in regular classrooms every day, and that's a great thing. If you look at the children, the 51 who are out of district, the biggest bar there is the blue on the left, 19 students with autism who are outside the district. Of course, a number of them who are inside the district as well. The next biggest category is a pink bar, and those are children with multiple disabilities, and smaller numbers in the other categories. Just some information about what's changed over the years. You'll see that the year 2012 year there, and for those of you who aren't aware, we had done an outside evaluation in 2012, and so we're looking at where we've come on those recommendations over the last 5 years this year. And so then 69% of the kids who were in out-of-district placements reflected primary disability categories of a combination of autism, multiple disabilities, and emotional disabilities. So 5 years later, just as a point of interest, we have 74% of the students in out-of-district placements. Smaller number of out-of-district placements, I might add, but a bigger percentage in those same categories. No surprise that the number of children with emotional disabilities has increased. We've talked about that before at budget meetings. Student services staffing. Our department is student services, and that includes special education and English language learner services and English language learner education and a variety of the related services and therapies. And so we have all of those personnel that are in the 2300B account, one of those pink accounts, and then and the ones on the left are mainly teacher kinds of roles, and the ones on the right are other kinds of roles. The director, an assistant director, new this year, and I say an assistant director, but in terms of her function, she also is the out-of-district coordinator. You remember last year at this time, we were looking for an additional administrative role, a full-time role. But we were not able to fund that, and so we added some duties, hours, and days, and an individual contract to our then out-of-district coordinator. So we're very happy that we have some additional help there, but it was not what we needed. It was a compromise, and we'll continue to advocate for the kinds of things that we need, because that's a huge job. Clerical people in each building. They help with the scheduling of meetings and that kind of thing. And then we have elementary psychologist chairs in each of the schools at the elementary. We have 3 shared among the 2 schools at the secondary level, psychologists, the full-time ELL teacher, and various contracted services. So what's changed there? Well, if you go back to 2012, we've moved from a part-time hourly rate out-of-district coordinator to a full-time person in that role. We were dealing with a 20-hour-a-week person, almost impossible job, and still is a pretty challenging job. We have moved from 3.5 adjustment counselors to 1 in each building. We lost adjustment counselors back when we opened these schools, so we're back to that. That's great. We've added a shared psychologist chair to the middle school, high school load. We've moved from 42 to 48 special education teachers. That was one of the recommendations in the report that I referenced, the evaluation we did a number of years ago. We hopefully, by next year, will be at 8 nurses that are dually certified, meaning 2 in each of 8 nurses who are dually certified is right, but 2 each at the middle school and the high school, as opposed to just 1. We've moved from contracting out for all of our ABA hours to having a 1.0 staff role, and then in addition contracted hours. We are planning to add more of those hours. In fact, even this year, doing that. Most of that money comes from a grant, the IDEA grant, which I'll talk about in a minute. And another recommendation from that report was that we needed the full range of sub-separate classes for some of our children with the greatest needs. We had them at the preschool level, we had the high school level, but we now have a class for preschool students for grade K to 2 students, for grades 3 to 5 students, middle school, and 2 such classes at the high school. So that's a great thing. Tuitions, we always talk about those. We're budgeting for, we have 51 currently, we're budgeting for 55 students. We always budget for 2 additional preschool students. that may not be known to us at the time we do the budget. We know that many of our preschool students, in fact, most of our preschool students, do come to us from early intervention. So we know how many to expect and budget for. But there may be students who were identified as having a need after the early intervention time in their lives and before age 3, or they may be students who move in. So that accounts for 2 of the additional 4 that will be in the budget next year. The other 2 reflect discussions that we're already having with families and anticipate that there may be a placement. So we have private day schools, range of $39,500 to $202,000. We have private residential schools, 14 students there. The range there is $72,000 to $277,000+. We have 1 student in a public residential school. That would be something like the Canton Hospital School. That comes out of Chapter 70, so you never see that in a budget, but it is like an assessment when we get our state funding. So you don't see the exact dollars there. And then we have other public schools. Some public schools in the area will take as a tuition student a student that we have, and we have 1 student like that. That cost is about $58,000. 17 students at our own collaboratives, our SURE collaborative, the range being $48,300 to $71,000, depends upon the kind of a program that the children are in and the age of the student. And then there are some other collaboratives that may have a unique program that our students attend, and that range is $52,000 to $74,700. What's changed about tuitions? Well, in FY10, 9-10, the out-of-district tuitions budget was 36.18% of the special ed budget. The state average at the time was 33, but we were over the state average at the time our evaluation was done. Those were the years when we had 66 students one year, 60 students that we budgeted for. In the budget that we're projecting for the coming year, our district tuitions represent 26% of our the total proposed budget, and that's despite sharp increases in individual tuition costs. So those costs are significant. However, it's more a function of 2 things. One is the increasing, kind of above a typical inflationary rate, the increasing cost of the tuitions, and the fact that we use the offset from the circuit breaker fund, and that varies from year to year. So it's much more a function of escalating costs and circuit breaker than it is additional students. And this is some longitudinal information. Way down at the bottom there, you can see that percent of the total operating budget that the projected budget is, and that will change, and that number, John, I can't see it on my screen. 23.8%, the original projection. That is already down a bit because we made some adjustments. And then you can see circuit breaker. Circuit breaker came in FY04, and for a few years it was kind of shaky. We didn't get full funding for it every year, even though it was the law. The law says that it will be according to annual appropriation. But the last several years, we've gotten very stable, nearly full funding, and that shows up in the costs. So I'll skip over this one because it's only relevant to that report, and I know you want to get to the bottom line. So there's the special ed budget. 4.23%, down from the prior, and $11,961,295. Now, we didn't mention, but should have mentioned at the very beginning, that our budget is a net budget. So it is offset by some grants. I'll talk about 2 in particular. It's offset by some of our revolving accounts that collect things like activity fees or charges that we get from rental and usage of our building and some other kinds of things. So the whole budget is a net budget. So, for example, in the case of special education, the actual dollars that are spent in special education projected for next year, $14,400,747. However, the budget and the town pays for $11,961,295. The two biggest offsets that we have for the special education budget are the IDEA grant, which is really the only funding that we get from the federal government directly for education and particularly for special education. That next year is projected at a little over $9 million. It's been between 900,000. It's been projected and has been, as you can see, growing a little bit each year, which is a good thing, but has been between $800,000 and nearly $1 million. The other big one there is the $1,196,599, and that is the circuit breaker. We talked about that a minute ago. That has varied a lot. If you go back, you see to 12-13, it was $767,600. It's been increasing each year, but it increased a great bit this year, and that's mainly the reason that the tuition account is down some. So in all, we have as offsets that actually appear as minuses in the budget detail. We have offsets in a total of $2,439,295. Let me go back. $2,439,453 in offsets to that $14 million real cost for special ed. In the case of regular ed, the offsets, there are more of them because we have more revolving accounts there that can offset things like utilities cost and space usage and custodial costs and so on. There are fewer of them, but the biggest one there is the full-day kindergarten, which is at the end, the last number there in the right-hand column. So that's over $730,000 that offsets our half of the full-day kindergarten. When I say our half, you have to have a half-day kindergarten, but the full day, the other half-day is paid by the tuitions. So the total amount of offsets there, smaller than in special ed, is $1,363,406. And how do we use those the IDEA dollars? Well, this year we're using them offsetting the cost of some teachers, so that's a minus in that part of the detail of the budget. We're using them for paraeducators, 230, excuse me, 30,000 for that. Fringe benefits, when we get big grants from the government, they expect us to take out of those grants mandatory retirement and benefits amounts of money. So we lose some of that money right away to those things. And then specialized textbooks, special equipment that a student may need, travel, contracted services. So, where are the changes? We're at the end. So, we've made a number of changes, and they're all there in the colored bars. We had one error. That was a $4,500 error, so that was in our favor. That reduced the budget. We have been able, with our very successful Kids in Action program, to have them contribute to costs for the facilities that they use. The space, the fact that they use some of our buses to transport children from the site where they are to the Kids in Action location. We've been able to charge them for some energy costs. And so all of those represent offsets to the sections of the budget that are impacted. And that's a great thing. Our Kids in Action program is a very successful one. We were really fearful when we went to a full-day kindergarten and took away their biggest revenue producer, which was the wraparound program. We were fearful about whether that program could survive. And in fact, it has survived and flourished and now is able to help us with some of the costs of running the program on our end. We have found out that two of the teachers that are returning, two of the teachers that are currently on a year's leave of absence, so one of them is not returning, which means a savings because the person replacing her is a less costly teacher. On the other hand, there is one that actually cost us some money because she is returning, and there's an additional cost there. So in that column that says change, you'll see that 1 plus. And that's the way it is with people on leave. Some save us money and some cost us some money. Utilities, John did a recalculation of the assumptions, using different assumptions about utilities, and we think that we can reduce the budget there by $54,000 as a result of that change in assumption. School committee, excuse me, did vote to increase the full rate to by 2%, and therefore there's an additional amount of revenue that will come in that we can use for an offset of $17,400. And we had a recent teacher resignation, unanticipated, that will save us $15,000 when you calculate what we think the cost of the filling the vacancy will be. So overall, John, overall, thank you. So at the top of this, there are two boxes. So the box in the far right that says 47,613,724, that should be a familiar number because that's what you voted for us for this year. So that was the budget, or that is the budget for the year that we're in. 36 of that was in regular education and 11.4 was in special education. If you move to the left, still in the top box there, the budget that we originally were proposing was $50,279,561. And you can see that 38.2 of that was in regular ed and 11.9 in special ed. And the percent increase was 5.6 overall. If you look down at the bottom, sorry. So if you look down at the bottom, we have reduced that budget over the last two meetings by $183,777, that total amount. And that gives us a new proposed budget of $50,095,784. That's where we sit today. Will there be other changes? Undoubtedly. In fact, we think that we're going to have another retirement, but we don't have it in writing and paper yet. So that will change as we go through this process. And if you look then to the right, the new projection in terms of percent increase is 5.21. And you can see the components of regular and special education. And so we do anticipate change. We expect that you expect there will be more change. And we certainly hope that the changes that can come along will be as painless as the ones we've made to date. Because to date we haven't had to cut into the meat of the regular budget or any of the new things that we had proposed. So that's the important figure, 5.21%, $50,095,784. So we have a ways to go. We certainly understand that, and we'll keep working at it. We know you will prod us and help us to do that. I want to just remind folks who are here of what the process is. So the next formal meeting that we have will be the regular school committee meeting of February 13th. And at that time, as part of that meeting, we have to have a required public hearing on the budget. Between now and then, and even on that day, the school committee will be deliberating. They will be establishing priorities, and they will be working towards coming to the budget that they will adopt, and that is scheduled for the meeting of February 27th. Again, a regular school committee meeting, not the typical Thursday night budget meeting. So we've got a ways to go. We're hoping for some new information, maybe some new ideas. We know that the AdCom subcommittee is deliberating, and we'll have discussions, I suspect, with them as well. But that's the process. Still, school administration proposed budget will continue to be that until the school committee has made all of its recommendations, until they've heard what other things may want to be discussed as part of that public hearing. And then the final vote. But that's not the end of the story either, because once the school committee adopts a budget, both the advisory committee and the selectmen will vote on that budget, and the advisory committee recommendation will be the one that goes to town meeting. And then when town meeting comes up at the end of April, that's when the final budget decisions will be made. So it's a long process. I think I counted up something like 26 meetings that have to do with the budget. And so we've got a ways to go yet. So thank you for your attention. Liz is here somewhere, and John is here. And if there are questions, we can attempt to respond to them.
Thank you, Doctor. Very thorough, detailed presentation, as always. Questions from my colleagues?
Good.
So a couple things. Dot, thank you so much. And just while you're here and before I had a couple comments and a couple questions, I did want to acknowledge, and I see Mary Eastwood in the back, I know yesterday South School and Plymouth River both got some big honors at the State House, and I just want to acknowledge that and acknowledge all the hard work of the staff, school committees past and present, the administration. I think I heard Liza tell me that this was the first time that 2 schools in one district received this honor at one time. And I think, you know, what it reminds us all is that behind all these dollars and all these charts and things, there are programs and services, and so congratulations to everybody who had a part in that. It's really, really very terrific. A couple quick comments. You know, this year in the budget, the school department followed kind of the guidance of the town, which was a levels services budget, which says we kind of put together a base budget that you've seen here, which is everything we're doing right now, and then additional things kind of kept separately. And I very much appreciate that, because I think it makes our collective job easier, particularly in a year like this when the revenue growth isn't as strong as we've seen in the past. On the budget itself, and I, you know, you've been talking and going through this for a long time, so I'll make a couple comments, but I'd ask you maybe to take these back with you, because I know it's, you know, it's still the middle of the process. And I'll say too that as the parent of a high schooler, of one high schooler and one 8th grader, as I'm looking at the elementary enrollment going down by 49 and the high school enrollment going up by 45, I'm just kind of asking myself, how do you shift, you know, is there a way to kind of shift some of the resources to somehow account for that? You know, you've heard me say in the past, sometimes when the enrollment goes down, but we have the same number of sections, what that means is our class sizes go down, and I think that's terrific. I remember one of my children in 5th grade was in a class of 29, and it was really, really tough. But I guess I'm mentally kind of saying, is there anything beyond the 4/10 of a Chinese teacher that needs to be done? Because I think because at the high school, you've got about 44 more kids coming up.
I'm so glad you asked that.
Oh,
And the
we didn't
reason
plan
for that
this.
is
We didn't
that,
plan this.
You know that we come when we need more because we have more children. We, this year, in the elementary schools, have 4 fewer sections than we had last year. So in 16-17, we had 4 fewer sections than we have in 17-18 projected, and we are, other than that kindergarten, which will be offset by tuitions, we have no classroom teachers asked for the elementary. The secondary level is another matter, and we can live with a level services budget for another year, but given that the high school enrollment has been growing, we've added a few pieces of secondary staffing over the last 2 or 3 years. There's nothing there other than the Chinese, and that actually may not be a need. But you can expect in another year, we simply have to add. And I can tell you that the biggest crunch point in terms of enrollment at the secondary level really is at grade 6. Those classes all are 25 or 26. And at the elementary level, if a teacher has a class of 25 for a year, that is a challenge. We certainly acknowledge it as a challenge. But at grade 6, where a teacher has 5 sections, if every one of them is at 25 or 26 students, that's a big chunk. That's more than 125 students. And more importantly, and some of you in the room who are parents can relate to this, that's also 125 or 126 parents and families to deal with. So that's where our biggest crunch point is at the moment. But the fact we haven't in the last few years kept up with that 169 additional students at the high school, you can only go so long with level services. So certainly you could expect that we do need staffing in a number of areas there.
And I know with the elementary and the 4 schools, sometimes it's not so clean because you do have 4 schools. But, I just, as we're looking at that next year, keeping that perspective of what's going on in the secondary in the back of our minds might be helpful.
You can all have an exercise in doing this. If you go back to that slide that has to do with the monthly enrollment chart that actually gives the classes, people always say, well, you could have fewer. So I would challenge any of you to go through those actual classes and tell me, okay, where is it we can pull out a teacher that it gives a reasonable class size? The good news is that chart shows amazing balance after, in all the years since East now has been open, there's amazing balance among the 4 schools. That's a good thing. And the second thing is, I think we have a total of 4 classes that are at 25 among the 92 sections that we have.
And only 5 years ago, that was a much bigger number, and we've worked hard to, we've worked hard to ratchet that down. I would just say, and John, I think a lot of what you've done on the facilities, I just think it gives us a better handle on that part of the budget. Just kind of the way it's presented, the way it's looked at, it's super helpful.
And I would point out, too, that those are only some of John's slides but any of you who are on the advisory committees, or you, Mary, representing the Selectmen, have the original PowerPoints and have a lot more of that backup. But John does a tremendous job at justifying what the budget items are that we...
And so, one thing as you're looking, and particularly, and I know you've asked about the custodians and some of those kinds of things, as we go further in this budget process, and I think we're kind of like, I think we're at about halftime in our budget cycle right about now. But as you're going through and we're looking at things, one thing I might ask you to do that I know you do every year, but, take a look at the revolving funds, and particularly, I usually calculate what I call a turnover ratio, which is, how many years of a balance do we have? And to the extent that I look and say, we've got athletic fields, and these fields are generating revenue, and that's coming into the revolving account, and it's a little more predictable at the high school, maybe you'll find that some of those, that you might be able to increase the offset in the budget. Because as I think about it, some of those, we should be able to pay for some of those activities with the fees we're collecting. And again, I think especially at the high school, we now have a couple years' worth of data. So, we might have more data to look at that. I just make 2 points, big picture, which is that, Dot mentioned at the beginning, and this is for members of the audience, we're still trying to figure out our revenue picture, and, the governor's budget, the governor put out his budget. We're going to see how it goes to the legislature. One point I want to make, because I know a lot of you are paying attention, particularly to the school budget in Chapter 70, and we've got a little bit of a tradition in the town, which is that all the revenue that we get in, we kind of all rise and fall together as a town. So if 6 weeks from now, the legislature adds $200,000 to our Chapter 70 money, that kind of goes into the town coffers, and we all sort of look at it together. And the reason for that is that in years when Chapter 70 funding gets cut, we don't want to say, well, the school department's got to cut a couple $100,000. So as we're working to close our budget deficit, I would ask everybody to keep that in mind. I know our board has gotten a lot of letters, and I think a lot of people are here today because a budget request has been surfaced. I've responded in email to everybody who's written to me to say that, at this point in the budget process, I can appreciate that there might be some anxiety that the initiative that's important to you isn't showing up on those slides. And at this point in the process, once the administration budget is presented, as Dot said, now the school committee goes back and gives Dot some guidance. And so some things may come out of the budget, some things may go into the budget, some dollars may be reallocated. And so I think what I would just say to this group is that we understand that this is a request that's been made. I think it's on everybody's radar screen. I think most definitely as the school committee works through, and to that end, the last point I would make is that, in this whole process, the elected school committee and the school administration have the authority over how the dollars are spent. And so even after the town meeting process, by statute, those decisions can be made. And so I think for the selectmen, for the advisory committee, what we're looking at really is kind of a total budget amount, a total dollar budget amount. But we understand that the discretion over how those dollars are used really lies with the school committee and the school administration. So we know you've been active in those meetings, and that's the right place to continue to be active and to advocate, and these meetings will continue to go on. There will be a lot of changes that will take place. Next week, we will be getting an updated financial forecast. If anybody's interested in that, we're happy to provide it. You're probably going to see that there is still a deficit. That's kind of typical at this stage in the year. So we will all continue to work together to try to bring together a budget that we can collectively go into town meeting and ask for town meeting's approval. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. I probably don't have as much to say. I will tell you that primarily tonight, I'm really here to listen. But I do want to thank Dr. Gallo, John, staff, and the school committee, because I come from the perspective, obviously, as you know, I served in that committee, and I see some of the members I've served with, and I also see some new members. And I want to thank you all collectively for the work you do. Again, those slides, I don't know how many meetings, Dot, there were, but there's countless hours and revisions and discussions, and I've always been in awe of the work that you do, because it isn't easy. And I know that there are a lot of competing interests, and you may listen to them at different meetings, obviously, and neighbors that are very concerned about issues. And I also have been monitoring, the process a little bit from afar, but as a concerned citizen, just knowing that you guys are doing a great job with this budget, and I just want to make sure I thank you. In the end, I'll listen. I know how the process works. We're all going to come back, and there'll be further discussions, but my perspective always has been is that there are many needs with the school budget in our children that go to this public schools. And I've always been very supportive of attempts to work within the budget we have to give them everything they need, and obviously a little more if we can do it. It's very challenging from year to year, but I anticipate trying to do everything I can, which is a collective effort here. I'm only one member of the Board of Selectmen. The advisory, as Mary said, and Dot said, will have their position forwarded to town meeting, but I'm very receptive and look forward to listening to the school committee over the next few weeks in terms of what suggestions they have in terms of budget numbers.
Thank you. Dr. Gallo, thank you so much. As always, very thorough in the school department and the school committee for the hard work. I won't replow the ground that my colleagues have set out, although my thanks to Mary in her work as a liaison from the Board of Selectmen. This is the first meeting. I got the emails too. I responded to each person that reached out to me. I'm listening and I'm watching closely, and that's what I'm going to continue to do. The advisory committee has its work to do. I believe that it needs that opportunity to do that, and I am very interested to see how that other issue shakes out. So, Mr. Taylor.
Great. Thank you. Again, thank you very much, Dr. Gallo, for the presentation. I thought I'd just give a little bit of an overview of the advisory committee and our process, because it seems like oftentimes if I'm out and about and I talk about the advisory committee, sometimes I'm met with a blank stare. So I thought it would be a little bit helpful to give you a sense of our responsibility and what we do. We're a 15-member committee that are appointed by the moderator. So we're effectively viewed as an independent body of volunteers within the town and community. We have two major responsibilities. The first revolves around the budget. We look at every budget very carefully that's presented to us by the town. And we ultimately, as somebody indicated, we ultimately will collaborate with the selectmen to present a balanced budget to town meeting for consideration and vote by the members of the town. The second function we serve is that we look at every warrant article and item that's put forth in front of town meeting. We research each item, we hear each item, and we vote whether or not to recommend those particular articles at town meeting for the consideration of the townsfolks. Relative to our budget process, again, what we do is we look at the town's available resources, and then we measure that, and we measure the requests by both the municipal side of the budget as well as the school side of the budget. And then we attempt to balance the budget given a finite amount of resources that the town has. When you think about our resources, just like any other business that has revenue, the town does not have an unlimited amount of revenue. We have a tax levy that can only increase by 2.5% year over year. We also have some growth in town, which is added to that levy, and then we have some state and federal funding that we receive as a town. That's really our available resources. So as we go through each and every budget process every year, the requests always exceed the available resources. So we have to, as an advisory committee, and again in collaboration with the Board of Selectmen, have to make decisions as to how we're going to fit the requests within our available resources. So when you think about the request from the school department is requesting currently an increase of 5.2%. Again, measure that against a budget levy that increases at 2.5%. And you see some of the challenges that we as an advisory committee in the town have. We don't have an unlimited amount of resources that are available to us to spend. So we take considerable time, the advisory committee does, in terms of looking very critically at every budget that's presented to us, working with every department, working closely with the school department and school committee to really decide what we can afford as a town. and what we should be presenting to townsfolk as our budget. So please, we always are very interested in hearing about the public comments and input, and thank you. We've gotten a number of letters as well, and they're very valuable and important. They're shared among all the committee, and we really appreciate your input. And certainly, we'll take that into consideration. As Mary said, I think it's important to note, though, that from a school committee perspective, we look at each line item. As I mentioned, we have a subcommittee that attends all these meetings as well, and they're really focused on the details of the budget that's presented to us. They spend a considerable amount of time looking at it. And then, ultimately, our education subcommittee will effectively come up with a budget that they believe that can fit within the overall town budget. They'll present that to the advisory committee for consideration. They'll work with the school committee and school department to determine and to basically validate where that number came from. And then the school department and school committee have the ability to, determine on their side what to recommend for a budget. But ultimately, the school committee has a statutory responsibility that they can spend the pool of money that the town provides to them as they see fit. It's a very collaborative process. It's one that takes a lot of time and effort and energy, but ultimately, I think we end up at the right place for the town. So with that being said, I'd be happy to open up for questions from my colleagues here. Now, mind you, we have multiple chances to ask questions of the school department and the school administration as they go through the budget process, so know that this isn't our first bite of the apple, nor will it be our last bite of the apple. So I'll open it up to my colleagues to see if anyone has any questions on the presentation we heard tonight. Mr. Sharkansky, and please come to the microphone.
Jim Sharkansky Advisory Committee. I don't mean to turn my back to all of you, it's just kind of in a circle. My question or comment to the school committee as well as the administration is, for the years that I've been on the advisory committee, probably in the last 3 or 4, the same comment has been made to specifically to the schools, is that the rate of increase of your budgets is becoming unsustainable. That when you model out the forecast and keep your rate of growth, the out years, the deficit just increases dramatically. So what I'm hoping is that in this deliberation and as setting precedents going forward is that that budget number becomes more and a more manageable amount. And I know there are hard choices to make, but like Jim had said and Mary had said, the amount of revenue that this town has to use is limited, and right now in the forecast in the out years, it's still limited. But each year I see that the school committees, the school department's asking is not realizing that in some way, that at 5.2% budget, where we're only taking in less than half of that, and continue on every year, at some point this town is going to hurt itself or cripple itself, and we're going to have to make some real choices that we don't want to make. So what I'm just asking is that in the next few weeks, in this deliberation, in these meetings, that it really be taking in consideration, not just for the next fiscal year, but going forward. That's all I have to say at this point.
Jim. Anyone else on advisory have comments? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, Leslie, yes, please.
Jim? We are well aware of that issue, and this 7 are looking closely at that issue for the long term, and we'll make every effort of what we can do we're trying to make some adjustments and some things. Our committee, each year, it could be a different 7, we hope not, but, but I'd also like to add that at the state level, in 2015, the state legislature had a foundation budget review commission, which reviews the formula for Chapter 70 funding, and they made a recommendation to adjust that formula because the formula has not been changed since 1993, and education has changed significantly since that time, and the budget items and funding, healthcare costs for teachers, any employee has changed dramatically. Special education costs have changed, English language learning costs have changed, variety of different items. And so that commission is making a recommendation that the state change the funding that they provide. And it's hundreds of millions of dollars off what should be, and also the state has not been even funding to inflation rates. So we have a big challenge in our whole state of how do we maintain the quality education that was viewed and wished for in 1993 with ed reform to where we are today. How do we all keep up? So we're not alone in this challenge, but the 7 of us are looking at that. So.
Understood. So I don't want to make a political thing of this.
No, it's.
No, I'm not saying that, but when I see a state government.
To the mic?
I didn't want to make a political thing, and I understand that the state has promised certain things that haven't come true in over 20 years yet. So I guess what I'm asking, is just we got to do with what we have. Mm-hmm. We can't count on the state. I don't want to say this, but the state, I guess you would write to your representatives and ask why they're giving $18 million to pay raises to themselves instead of giving it to the schools. But that's something to be debated at another time. I'm just saying this is all we have. Mm-hmm. Unless someone wants to make private donations to the school department, we just need to make it in the rate of growth or our needs at a sustainable pace so that it doesn't hurt the rest of the needs and operations of this town. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Sharkey.
Thank you.
Any other member of advisory committee have a question?
All right, before we go on to the next topic then, is there anybody in the audience who would like to say anything at this time? Yes, Mr. Napoli.
Hi, Diane DiNapoli, 16 Gardner Street. I'd like to thank the school committee and Dr. Gallo particularly for all their efforts they've put in recently towards special ed improvements. Dr. JB just left the room, but Dr. Labilois has been essential in really putting forth a vision that I think will be beneficial to all children in Hingham, not just special ed. So when we're looking at funding, whether it be for an external evaluation or funding for special ed, again, I plead to the school committee to follow what you've heard, make his vision a reality by fully funding whatever he needs necessary for our children. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else who'd like to speak? Yes, Mr. Watson. Good evening. Nice to see you again.
Jim Watson, 291 Rockland Street. Dr. Gallo, thank you. Once again, it's an unbelievable performance. I can't see how you have time to run the schools when you're journalizing all those numbers, but it's just amazing. But specifically, I just learned that the school bus drivers don't have sick time until their 5th year or 5 years, and I wonder if that doesn't lead them to drive when they really shouldn't be, and if there's any chance that a future budget might be able to deal with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Is there anybody else who'd like to say anything before we move on to the next agenda item? We're a half an hour, we're 40 minutes over, and the Community Preservation Committee is patiently waiting, and we have someone who would like to speak. Okay. If you could identify yourself by name and address, please.
Jamie Kenny, 34 North Street. Thank you very much. It's been an interesting process. Thank you to the school committee and to Dr. Gallo. I just would like to encourage everyone as we move forward with deciding where we're spending this money to make sure that we're really doing the due diligence to make sure we are checking on the money that's being spent and not just relying on reports that are presented. And I think we really, as a town, need to do a better job of asking better questions and maybe not just taking what's put up there for what it is. I think there's other ways to look at these numbers. I think anybody that's worked in finance understands that, and I think everybody needs to do a great job of finding out from not just the speakers of how that money's being spent. I think we'd have a lot more money for the other parts of the town if the money was being spent a little bit better in education. So I think that that's part of the process as well. Everybody needs to start asking questions. Okay, thank you.
And I would invite anybody, as a former member of the advisory committee, I think an important role that the advisory committee plays across the entire town is to really do a lot of due diligence and kick the tires on every budget request, on every reserve fund. And I think one of the reasons that we're a AAA-rated bond community is because we have collectively in our government a lot of different people who play very important roles in understanding our business. And I would invite anybody to go to the education subcommittee meetings and to the advisory committee meetings to see, because I think what you'll see in some ways are that the advisory committee also has some of its own analytics to try to look at different things, and I think sometimes it gives them insight into the numbers, and it may give insight to others as well.
And speaking for my, no, go. Do you want to speak?
Just briefly.
Sure, come on up.
Hi,
Rather hear from you.
Katie Goggin of 101 Hobart Street, and I corresponded with many of you. Thank you for reading and for your response. And to follow up a little bit on what Jamie Kenny just mentioned, I think one of the real issues here is results-based budgeting, and there's lots of folks here representing the special needs population, and we really haven't seen the results for our children that we're hoping to, given that 24% of the school budget, which I know is the largest budget in town, is spent for these kids. And so I think that the issue at hand is really tying the results we're seeing for our children to the dollars being spent, and that's where we would like everybody to dig a little more deeply.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was going to say something, but I'm going to shut up. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak before we move on to the next agenda item? I don't see anybody, so at this point, I'd like to thank all of you who came in for this particular matter. You don't have to leave, obviously, but we are going to move on to the next agenda item.
Great.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gallo. Members of the school committee,
Thank you.
Take care.
good to see you again, as always. Hey.
Good, nice to see you. Honestly, this is where I...
Okay. The meeting continues apace. At this time, I'd ask the members of the Community Preservation Committee.
There's a plan, sir.
All right, to join us, please.
Yeah. No, it's not you.
Oh, I figured that. Senate was voting resolution.
Yeah, they both House and Senate did.
Hey, Carol.
We fast.
Nice to see you.
We're going to get the 2-minute version tonight.
You know what? Less is more.
How you doing?
Did I say that?
Vote for everything and we'll put right home.
Is that
Thank you.
Leadership's getting big numbers, judges and I don't know who else.
I do.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I saw it at one point. I just don't know.
That was nice.
They circled the wagons a little bit so they try to cover for themselves.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the next matter on the agenda is a joint session with the Advisory Committee and the Community Preservation Committee. And we're going to be presented with a presentation by the chair, Ms. Carol Piles. And we have been provided with a PowerPoint, which I anticipate will be shown on the screen before you momentarily. The lights will go out shortly. And here we are. Beautiful. Good. We have ignition. All right.
Hey, wait, where'd everybody go?
Two Carols.
Was something I said?
I don't want to listen to us.
You know what? I'm all ears.
Carol, how do we do lights? Oh, go ahead. That's better. Can we close that? Mary, are we allowed to close this? Oh, sure.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I don't know why it's open.
I know.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Carol Piles, Chairman of the Hingham Community Preservation Committee. I'd like to start by thanking the committee that did such a good job all year. Many of them are here tonight. They include Bob Mosier and Gary Tundorf-Dick and Tony Kiernan and Jim Conroy, who's our vice chairman and is on a book tour tonight, don't you know, and Larry Lindner and Vicki Donlin and Jim Watson and Kathleen Roberts. And they all did a beautiful job, and special thanks tonight to Carol Costello, who makes us look smart and organized and does such a fabulous job for us. And also to Roger Fernandez, I think is not coming tonight, did he? Yeah. The town engineer who helps us with many of our projects. So we're going to start with just a quick little review of where we are for the year, and then we'll get on to this year's new projects. Okay. As you probably all know, the CPA Act was passed in Massachusetts in 2000. We joined up in 2002, so by 2003 we were able to start funding projects and recommending projects to the town meeting. So over those 14 years, you can see where the money has gone, and with a quick eye, you can see an immediate problem. 63% of all the money we've given out or committed to giving out so far has gone to open space and 21% to historic preservation. That is because of the two largest projects, the bonding and borrowing, $4.5 million for the Lehner property that we just closed on in the last few weeks, and $1.1 million for the Historical Museum, which kind of tilts the numbers a little bit. But if you look at the third one, community housing, better known in Hingham as affordable housing, has only gotten 9% of our funding. It's not for not wanting to try. We are trying to fund them as best we can. We won't get into all the details of that, but we want you to know we're very aware of the imbalance here. 5% has gone to recreation, but of course they've only been able to receive funding from us for the last few years. 2% goes to our administrative funds, and she's worth every penny of it. So the total, if you include in all the borrowing we've done, it's $21,568,000, makes up 100%. Okay. The debt, by the way, that we're carrying right now is $5.6 million. So far there have been 114 projects over 14 years that we've helped fund. And this is just a quick glance at some of them, the ones we had the best pictures of, frankly. Community housing. You'll recognize many of these. Historic preservation. Open space. You'll notice Lehner property is the bottom right. That's the 53 acres we just passed and town now owns. And recreation projects throughout the town. So now we'll get into what we're proposing for this year. And it's quite a nice variety of projects. We received requests from all the different areas that we can fund. And nothing is particularly unusual this year. We're not asking to borrow. These are sort of typical projects this year. So the next slide shows you what we're recommending. Of the 20 applications we got in this year, 12 we're going to recommend to go on to town meeting. 7 of them have withdrawn their applications for various reasons. They couldn't get permission to use the land they needed. We couldn't figure out who owned the property that they were trying to work with. There were lots of different reasons, but 7 withdrew, and 1 got to the end, but we voted not to move forward on that one, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So the total requests for this year were $1,658,683. Of that, we're recommending funding $1,086,629. Okay, our budget for this year breaks down this way. We're off to the next one. So the 1.5% that we collect on your property taxes came to $978,823 this year. We had a matching grant from the state of $201,390, and so our total revenue for the year is $1,118,113. We also clawed back some money that wasn't being used, that was given to a project, couldn't be used, and it came back to us of $60,000. That gave us a total to start out with of $1,240,113. Now, the budget broke down into $50,000 for administrative costs, $309,618 for historic, which includes the payments that we make on the Heritage Museum. This year they are $167,250. That is in the 309. Community housing, $118,011. That's exactly 10% of what our revenue income was for the year. We have to give them 10%, of course. Open space came to $390,000, which included $360,000 payment for debt on the Laner property. Recreations projects came to $219,000. So the recommended again, the amount is $1,086,629, which left us with $153,484 left over, which caused great discussion, as you can imagine. So let's start in on some of the projects that we voted to pass this year. The first is conservation of historic town records. The proponent is the Historical Commission. They've requested $6,500. The scope of the project is 12 volumes of Hingham's oldest known records will be professionally repaired, restored, stabilized, conserved to make them available for use by the public and will be stored at the town clerk's office. You can read what they are there. They're in bad shape, but they're very precious and contain many of the earliest known records of Hingham that passed unanimously. You may notice on some of these that while there's 9 members of the committee, the votes added up to 8. And that's because Gary Tundorf Dick, who represents town planning, came to us. It was a member of our committee, but had a very important meeting that night. Rules state you need to be in the room, be part of the discussion in order to vote. So he had to make a decision. He did not vote with us that night. So total is 8, is the unanimous vote. Old Ship Meeting House steeple. I love Tom Wilson's story. Is Tom still here? There was a car accident in front of Old Ship Church, and they went out to see what it was, and somebody happened to look up, and the steeple was like leaning off to the side. They knew they had problems. So they've requested $41,103. Proponent is First Parish Church of Hingham Association. The scope is the church's wooden spire has been weakened by rot and can no longer carry the weight of its iron, gold-leafed weather vane and ball, a treasure of 18th century craftsmanship. Total cost of the project is $134, so they're asking well under a third of the project. And they had to immediately go up and take it down so it wouldn't fall in the building. And they got started and then put the project together and came to us. It's what they're going to call a design-build project. There are things they don't know until they get into recreating some of these parts to get it back up again. So that was a unanimous vote. Now, the Whiting Memorial Chapel restoration. They requested originally $65,000. This was a vote in which we all came up with different numbers we wanted to give them, and so we averaged them out. So we voted to give them $40,625. The proponent is the High Street Cemetery Association. The scope is restoration and preservation of the Whiting Memorial Chapel, located in the High Street Cemetery and built by Albert Whiting, who lived at 55 Cottage Street at the time. This 1905 non-denominational Gothic Revival chapel, it's not a church, it's a chapel, is in need of restoration in order to preserve this historically and architecturally significant building. The scope of work that CPC will fund includes the restoration of a portion of the original copper roof and gutters, restoration of the exterior stone walls, and perhaps some window casings, whatever we can do for $40,000. The architect on this was J. Sumner Fowler, who also designed the Ames Chapel, interestingly enough. It's about 22 by 60 feet. It's made of Weymouth seam-faced granite and Indiana limestone trim, if that means something to anybody. Okay, and that was a unanimous vote. Now, the next four have to do with repairing and getting in working order 4 antique Howard clocks, which are up in the steeples of 4 buildings in town. And I'm going to start by reading what the Article 46 was from the 1889 annual town meeting. Will the town adopt any measure to take charge of running and keeping in repair the clocks on churches at South Hingham, Hingham Center, on the New North Church, and other public clocks in the town? There's only 4 of them, and the 4th one being what we call dependable cleaners. It's the William Fearing II general store building. It's now Dependable Cleaners are renting that building. So the first one, New North Meeting House, the scope is to professionally inspect, clean, and rebuild or replace parts as necessary to restore this 1850 tower clock with 4 faces located at 1 Lincoln Street in the steeple of New North Meeting House. It was approved unanimously. I should tell you, all 4 clocks, somebody asked me on the way in, all 4 clocks together are $54,140, but we'll go through each one individually. They're going to be individual town warrant articles. It was easier for us to debate them individually that way. It's also easier to present them that way. The Congregational Church Tower Clock. The request is $13,800. The proponent is the Historical Commission. The scope is professionally remove the clock from the building, inspect, clean, and rebuild or replace parts, and then reinstall the clock. These are the steps necessary to restore the 1887 tower clock located at 378 Main Street. They are under renovation right now. If you've noticed, they've got about a $3 million project going on. The clock was not part of it. This is being handled by the town. There was one no vote on this one, and it had to do with the thought that perhaps we could wait on some of these projects, and one of the individuals in our committee felt that it was more important to pay off our debt at an accelerated rate and wanted to put extra money towards that, so that's the one no vote. By the way, I'd like to point out that Andrea Young and our Jim Conroy tippy-toed up the little ladders, and they are ladders, to get up to these old Howard clocks to take the pictures. Sort of hard to see some of them, but that's old Howard clocks. The William Fearing Building Tower Clock. Again, this is what we call dependable now. $15,170. Historical Commission. The scope is professionally remove the clock from the building, inspect, clean, and rebuild or replace parts, and then reinstall the clock. These are the steps necessary to restore this 1858 tower clock. It had some renovation in 1913. It's still an old Howard clock, located at 298 Main Street in the original William Fearing II general store. And that was a 6-2 vote. The restoration includes gold leafing the dial on the front. It's getting hard to see, and one person felt that shouldn't be necessary, and the other just wanted to put more money to paying off our debt. Second Parish Church Tower Clock Repair, $7,500. Professionally inspect, clean, and rebuild or replace 3 clock movements. It says 3 sides, and the master clock for this 1881 with some electrical components. These clocks run by weights pulling them down, the way an old grandfather clock at your house might do. They decided to replace the components with electricity. So it's still a nice old clock, but it's got components that are today's technology. Located at 685 Main Street in the Second Parish Church, which was built in 1743. And this again was 7-1 vote, same reason. Okay. Now, Conservation Fund the Conservation Commission requested $30,000. The Conservation Fund was established at the annual town meeting in 1997. The fund is solely supported by funds from CPC and is the only direct financial mechanism the Conservation Commission has to support property acquisitions and capital improvements to town conservation land. Frankly, I think they could have used twice as much, but that's what they've asked for. And you can see many of the properties. They have, I don't know how many acres all over town, with Laner being their newest property that they maintain. That was a unanimous vote. Harbor Boardwalk Extension. You all remember that in the last few years, they've put a boardwalk along, you look at the middle slide, along the beach embankment area that they built up because of storms flooding into the parking lot. That's a 300-foot extension. There's a picture of it on the right. This is a picture of it on the left. It's maybe too dark to see, but that's the old bathhouse. So that's where it ends, that's the terminus, and the new one would begin and go all the way up through the Grove area, almost 600 feet of linear pathway. So install a 600-foot continuation of the harbor walkway from the beach area through the Grove, made of semi-permeable brick pavers as approved by the Historic District Commission and the Conservation Commission. Enables handicap access through the Grove. Will not disturb existing trees in the Grove, so it's not a straight line. Continues their progress towards implementation of the initiatives in the 2007 plan for Hingham Harbor. This is just the next step. The committee is also planning, or has already, I'm not sure which, applied for a post-construction. They have done it, good. The Department of Conservation and Recreation, the DCR, gives grants after it's built to help support this kind of project as much as $50,000, and we will have just put in an application for that. And that was a unanimous vote also. The South Shore Country Club feasibility study and design plan. $75,000. The proponent is South Shore Country Club Management Committee. To conduct a feasibility study to assess the appropriate comparative costs and benefits of the following alternatives with regard to the deteriorating structure of its swimming pool facility, and to create a plan to execute the alternative determined by the assessment to be best. This is our town's municipal pool we're talking about. It happens to be at the South Shore Country Club. So there are options here to repair the existing pool, which is leaking. The foundation of it is now cracked and leaking. I should point out, it's actually was built in the 50s. It's way past its normal life expectancy. There's a second pool. When the town bought the country club, they superimposed a second pool on top of the original one, kind of like if you had your bathtub refitted by one of those companies that came in and just put another one on top. And so they really need to, they're on borrowed time, in other words. Another option would be to demolish the pool facility and terminate the pool operation, no town pool. Another would be to rebuild the existing pool facility at its current location. Another would be design and construct an outdoor pool, an indoor-outdoor pool facility, or an indoor pool and outdoor pool and fitness facility at a new location on the South Shore Country Club premise. And the last option would be explore other alternatives, including leasing land to a third party to build and operate a pool and fitness facility. If you're asking why a fitness facility with a pool, it's because that is one of the bigger sources of income. They will borrow and pay off out of their own funding sources, the income that they have on a yearly basis. So they will make that decision with the help of our Tony. Where's Tony? Kiernan, who does this for a living, which the best alternative is, which they can afford to do based on their ability to pay it off over time. And that was a unanimous vote. And the last is our own, hospitality. Hingham Affordable Housing Trust Opportunity Fund. This is because you made us wait too late to talk. I'm asleep.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I go to bed at 9 o'clock. So request of $118,011. That was 10%, as we said, of our income for the year. Proponent is Hingham Affordable Housing Trust. The scope, funds are set aside in the Hingham Affordable Housing Trust Opportunity Fund to assist with creation and preservation of affordable housing in Hingham. One person feels that we've given enough and they haven't built enough recently. Is that a fair way to put it? Okay, but 7 voted for it. And the last one is our own CPC Administrative Fund. We're the proponents. We're asking for $50,000. The scope is this account enables CPC to operate. No kidding, it's the only way we could do this. The Community Preservation Act allows a total of 5% of the town's annual CPA budget to be used for the administration fund. This request is a total of 4.2 of available revenue of 1.180113. This account is a rolling account that does not begin and end with the fiscal year. These funds are available at any time for unexpected legal fees or costs associated with CPC projects. Again, Lena would be a good example of this. We get hit with the closing bills and costs. So it's just as you can see there, part-time salaries from the people who make us who do everything. Legal fees, we pay into the state coalition, $3,500. Supplies, paper clips, lots of printing, and any unforeseeable expenses, and that was unanimous. I'd be glad to take any questions, but I'm sort of hoping that was straightforward.
Carol, just a quick question, and
Yeah.
maybe just for the audience at home. On the couple of projects where there was partial funding,
Yes.
the additional funding was raised privately by the groups?
I mean, the one that we only funded part of it?
Well, I thought there were 2, but in that example you're giving,
Yes, if we're doing usually up to about a third of the cost of a building project of some kind, they fund the rest of it. With the chapel, they have an endowment, which they've committed to using. Ship Church has their own income and so forth. Or like Heritage Museum, they did fundraising to bring it in, but they have to prove to us that they've got it or can get it.
Right.
A loan from Hingham Institution for Savings doesn't hurt, something like that.
I remember from last year.
Yeah.
And the only other question I had, Carol, is on the Conservation Commission, the $30,000, is it slated for any particular projects?
No, she read off there was a one-page list of all they hope to do in this coming year. And it's everything from kiosks and repair things and put rocks back up on bridges that have fallen down. It's the whole gamut, clearing trees that have come down. They take care of lots and lots of acres around Hingham, and that's their source of income for that.
Thank you.
We've encouraged them, as others, to come up with a 5-year plan so we can kind of start to plan out a little further. I don't think they're asking for enough money when you think of all that they do for us. But, don't like to push that. But if they come up with a 5-year plan, as Recreation is very good at doing that, for instance. Mark comes in with every minute laid out for the next 5 years. You know what he wants to do and when he wants to do it. Very helpful to us if we know what's coming.
Just quickly, want to thank you and the committee and Carol Costello for all the work you do. I mean, I obviously, being a member in the past.
We miss you.
Well, I miss you guys too. I enjoyed that very much, and it was always a lot of good work, and I see Bob here. A lot of good work that was done, and it continues to be done, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And just 3 quick things. To piggyback on Paul's last comment, I would just remind the audience that a year ago, the Community Preservation Committee actually came to this board and asked if we would be willing to sort of give up our seat, which Paul had occupied for a few years, to have a working member. And actually, we put together a task force to study that for several months because, we wanted to make sure that we understood, maybe any unintended consequences. And I think that's worked out very well for
Very
you,
well.
particularly given the large number of projects you have. 2 other things. First, whoever the person is on your committee who is suggesting debt repayment, I would just pass along my thanks, and I'm glad that the committee, as you're looking at your dollars, that one of the things you're considering is early payment of debt, given that there's $5.6 million of debt on the books. Some of it we haven't bonded yet.
Yeah.
So to the extent that we, some of it is still short-term borrowing, so to the extent that we can reduce that amount, it just helps everybody. The last thing, and Carol,
let me just
please.
make a comment about that. One thing that may not have shown up on here is that we thought the payments for the museum were going to be about $110,000 a year. I don't know why, but we hadn't factored in the interest on that. Oops. And also, we decided to change it from a 10-year borrowing to 5-year. So that's why it's $167 this year. So we're aiming at that. But the other thing, the reason the committee decided to put aside that $153 for future, maybe next year or the year after, is that 11 new cities and towns have joined CPA. And that means basically the same pot of income, which comes from the Registry of Deeds, a little tag on, that's going to be divided. And it also includes Boston and Springfield. We know we're not going to have the same money from them in the future. There is a bill being worked on right now that would make that possible in the future to perhaps come up with more money, but we're having to count on not having as much revenue in the future years. So,
well, we appreciate your thinking about all those different aspects of the funding. The last thing, and I know you and I talked about it briefly, I don't know, a couple of months ago. There's a CPC. One of your rules is that when a project is funded, the money has to be spent within 2 years,
That's right.
and that's understandable. I would ask you, this is kind of your peak season.
Mm-hmm.
So in your off season, after town meeting, I would ask you to consider perhaps whether it would make sense to modify your rules for community housing. And
well, they actually are, because all they have to do is come in front of us and say, whoops, we haven't used it yet, can we hang on to it? Yes.
Because I think one of the things that we've heard from the Affordable Housing Trust when they've come before us is that a lot of the properties that they purchase, it requires a good amount of money. And so I just would hate for there to be any sort of a barrier that's getting in the way of addressing the point you made at the beginning, which is getting more CPC funds into community housing and giving the groups that are working on affordable housing some different resources. And, from my perspective, if that opportunity fund accumulated over time, I actually think that might give us as a town more flexibility to take advantage of community housing opportunities that we may encounter. So I appreciate your...
It does, and we let it accumulate. When you heard me talk about clawing back $60,000, that was for money voted on by town last year to buy a property on Whiting Street and fix it up. And it was very specific. So when Roger took a look at it and others and decided, oh gosh, we have a great opportunity here, why don't we knock it down and build 3 affordable houses on that lot? It just financially made a lot of sense. We had to they had to give us the money back, so then we can re-give it to them in the future for what it's going to be used for. It's kind of a technical thing, but yeah. But no, I know we're trying to...
Thank you. I know
anybody knows of any properties
I know
or
it's an area of
houses?
focus for you, and we appreciate that and all the great work you do.
I'd like to thank Andrea Young for the work that she's done with respect to the clock repair
Yes.
initiatives. I had the pleasure of accompanying her, along with Ross Hochstrasser, to the New North Church down there on Lincoln Street. And you can see the picture there up on the screen, that the Howard clock was manufactured in Roxbury centuries ago, and we theorized that it was transported by rail to the square, and from there by, wagon. And these clocks were lubricated by whale oil, so I had an acute interest to see if I could detect what that smelled like. Difficult to pick up, but these, as Mr. Hochstrasser explained it to us, that by statute, the town was required to maintain clocks for the purposes of enabling people to know what time it is. So they were sited in these different church steeples as well as the one in the center. And many years ago, our local town clerk undertook the task of winding the clock each week. So I'm looking forward to seeing the clock in the center restored. That's very exciting. And the Hochstrassers, who are the gentlemen that bid on this project, also restored the clock at the Custom House Tower in Boston. So they're real craftsmen. And this is going to be a pleasure to watch this project unfold.
I'm looking forward to hearing them, too.
Yes.
It's going to be wonderful.
Jim, is there anything you'd like to add?
We're actually going to take up this, we've invited CPC to come in front of us on Tuesday night, at which point we'll have an opportunity to ask some additional questions, and we'll be voting on this article on Tuesday night. So, but I would invite any of my colleagues to who may have a question. Lucy.
Carol, just a point of clarification, mostly probably for the audience at home. This is a single article with 12 projects. It will be structured as it has in prior years. It will be an article currently called M, but it'll be somewhere in the warrant. And what we'll do is we'll go through each project, hold the ones with questions, vote on the whole thing. So it's not actually 12 separate projects or 12 separate articles.
Well, is there anybody who'd like to say anything before we? All right. At this time, I'll entertain a motion that the board vote to act favorably on Article M with respect to the community preservation.
I'm sorry. Did you ask for a comment from?
I did. Hey, Dennis.
Good evening. Dennis Friedman, 445 Cushing Street. As much as I miss attending evening meetings, I was not able to attend the meeting at the Community Preservation Committee when they went over these. I did send an email expressing some concerns. I attended the meeting, I think it was 2 weeks ago, but that was just for the vote and wasn't able to speak. So I thought I would take the opportunity to express some concerns that I have on 3 of these. And so the first one has to do with the steeple at the Old Ship Church. Clearly, it's an iconic building that means a lot to the town. I believe it's even on the seal of the town. And several years ago, when repairs were needed to be done, I did vote to do some repairs when I was on the advisory committee. I have a concern in 2 areas of that. One is that it's an active religious building, and I'm not sure that the town should be supporting a specific religious building. And 2, I think they probably have significant financial resources there, enough that they could afford the additional $40,000. I know that there's a nice parcel of land that is being sold across the street, or a building and parcel of land. And as a result, because I have reservations about it, about the town supporting an active religious facility, and the fact that I believe that they can perhaps afford the steeple work themselves, I would urge the Board of Selectmen and ultimately the Advisory Committee not to support that one distribution. I'll address all of them, then you can discuss or not discuss as you see fit. The clocks, which you just spoke eloquently about, the intricacies and so forth. As I'm sure everyone in the Advisory Committee and the Board of Selectmen know, but perhaps everyone at home doesn't know, a previous annual town meeting cannot hold a future town meeting to a particular task. So therefore, I believe the 1879 article that was discussed probably is no longer binding on the town, or if we felt it didn't need to be done, could be voted on in another town meeting, like the town meeting of 2017. My concern is that having lived in the town for about 36 years, I don't believe I've ever looked to see what time it is on those clocks. They're quite attractive, and I think that's nice. But my concern is after we spend $50,000 on repairing them, what is the ongoing cost to maintain them? And what is the utility to the town? Perhaps there should be cosmetic repairs done, but to actually, how many times I drive down Main Street or other places to look up and see the clock and what time it is, I think it's a nice idea, but it's $50,000 that perhaps could be used for affordable housing or other purposes. And the last one is almost as an aside, the Harbor Walk, which I think is a great idea. I'm just wondering if anybody's looked at the impact of a sea level rise in the future and how long we will get utility out of that Harbor Walk. Again, probably should ask the question before we put the first 300 feet in. I'm guilty. But again, I'm not objecting to the dollars, but I think it's an interesting cost, interesting question. So my real concern is some of the clocks are also obviously in active church buildings. I think is perhaps a different issue because it's deciding it's the function of the clock, which unless we decide to overrule the previous town meeting, we have some, I suppose, obligation to do. But the structural case in the Old Ship Church, I say I do have concerns about it. Thank you.
Let me
Sure.
answer the last one first. The new extension of the Harbor Walk goes from the beach area up through the Grove, which is raised up above sea level, quite a height. If you've ever walked along there, it's a nice, I don't know, 15, 20 feet or something straight down. I think the town will go under before the Grove. I'm just saying. Larry, you're hopping up and down. You want to answer one of these?
Yeah, I'd just like to speak before you get to that. Dennis, I want to kind of just rattle off my reaction to what you've just said there. The Old Ship Church, we did the bell tower there. We spent a lot of money there. We've done the ornamental iron there. We hold town events there, not religious. You know, it's an iconic symbol of the town, and you know it got whacked by lightning, you know, in the 80s. I don't want to see the steeple degrade to the point where it comes down. With respect to the clocks, you know, I've been in town a little longer than you, and I've enjoyed seeing the clocks work. And to be honest with you, I don't look at a clock that's only right twice a day. And those clocks have stopped working, but I'm pretty sure that once they start working again, you'll be looking at them to see what time it is. It's really nice to see it. The Congregational Church for many, many years has worked. And you come down Main Street, coming into the center, and you see that beautiful church with the steeple and that clock. It's a nice look. We're in New England, and we're in a historic town. I don't see a downside to that. And for the money, I think it's a good investment in the town's history. And frankly, I think if we just ignore it and just look at the, you know, stationary arms, the clock will just degrade over time and it'll just fade into history. I don't want to see that personally at all. So that's my reaction to your comments, respectfully.
One question, but it's sort of your overall question, I think, is why should we pay for anything if they can pay for it themselves? That's what CPC does. I don't know how else to tell you that. We share projects. And one like Ship Church, my heavens, that's the iconic building of Hingham. It's not only a historic landmark, it's a landmark building. It's very rare, known all over the country, if not the world. I want to be a part of that. I want to use our money, which is supposed to be to preserve the historic nature of our town. What better place than in the best building in town where everybody sees it, and such a small part of what they're going to be paying to do that. I think you also had a church and state problem there, you were expressing. That's been looked at by really smart people who are lawyers, and I'm not, over many years. About once a year we get somebody questioning it. Somebody reads an article someplace and says, well, what about this? And the deal is we're preserving the historic building. We put on roofs, we don't buy Bibles. You know, we patch up a foundation of an iconic old building that we want to save for the town. We don't pay the priest's salary. It's not church and state, and even the little chapel, which doesn't have a church involved with it, is non-religious. We want to save these wonderful old buildings. They together make up the fabric of the beauty of our town. Larry, you were dying to ask part of that.
I think you and Paul have covered it.
Okay. It's hard to be quiet, isn't it?
Jim Sharkansky Advisory Committee. As my committee, not this year's members, rookie members, but the others, no, I'm not a big fan of the CPC. I see it as a tax on a tax, but this is what the town. I don't, and you've been very kind, and it's not personal. But this is what the town voted for, so we go along with it. My concern is this: in a year where we're going to possibly make some really tough choices on operational costs for this town, it's hard to go along with some of these projects, and I know this money is separate from the operating budget, but look at someone in the town who says, why didn't we get a teacher, or why didn't we get things that are needed, a fireman, or whatever is needed, but we have a lovely brick walkway along the harbor. I'm just trying to, why not spend the money, as Mary said, pay down the debt? That would be the smarter thing at this point, as opposed to some of these projects, which I echo some of the sentiments of Dennis, where I don't understand. I give you, and I know we'll discuss this on Tuesday, Jim, in more depth, but...
You mean our debt, CPC's debt?
Yeah, the debt for the museum and the preservation for the land. But, something like the Congregational Church, which came to us one year, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, and said, we need money for ADA compliance for an entrance, and we don't have any other resources, and we need X amount of dollars, and we gave it to them. And then come to find out a few weeks later, they'd raised over $2 million for themselves to do renovations of the church. And I'm scratching my head thinking, they didn't have any resources to do the ADA compliance, yet they raised $2 million to do renovations of the church. Not saying the church didn't need it, but they had the resources. My concern is we're going along and spending this money, and the town might make some tough choices. I'd rather the tough choice be on the CPC as well, and let's pay down our debt with available monies, and maybe we'll have the resources later. I still question what will happen in the future with CPC, with Boston, Springfield, and the other towns coming in. The matches have never been exactly what the state had promised us from the beginning, and they're obviously going to be less going forward. I know they have a bill pending. I think the state will raise that money by either taxing me or with fees or something, just to get that money to pay me back, or to pay the CPC, reimburse CPC funds. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
I would just like to point out that we were tasked with trying to figure out who owns the clocks, and asked the town historian to get in the mix to give us some intel on that. And it's our best understanding that those are not owned by the churches. Those are owned by the town. Those are clocks that are the responsibility of the town to maintain. And the only reason they're in the steeple, obviously, is because of the height.
So that would be similar to Dennis's. Sorry. So my rebut to that would be similar to Dennis's, where a statute or a bylaw put in place in 1889 was there probably because that was the congregational place for most of the public to come and look at the clock and reset maybe their timepieces to be accurate, assuming that the church steeples were accurate. My generation, or the generations after me, they don't wear a watch. They look for accurate time. They look at their phone. So I'm like Dennis. I don't really look up at the building and see the clocks. I don't know if other people look up on the clocks to see the time. So again, I know the town might be responsible for them, but things have changed. It might be time to go along with the changes of the time. No pun intended. Sorry.
I can't possibly see an LED in the steeple, Jim.
No LED, nothing. Just build it, replace it with nice siding and paint it white, and it would be great.
Reasonable minds can differ, I guess. I'll entertain a motion to recommend favorable action on Article M.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you so much, Carol.
Thank you, Carol.
Okay. Thank you all for coming in. Before we sign off tonight, Tom, is there anything you'd like to add?
You're good, thank you.
Mary?
I'll set.
Paul? I have the chief down back there. Senior Chief, would you join us at the table, please? Greetings and salutations, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
I understand that there's an event that's slated to occur tomorrow.
So tomorrow is the anniversary of what we call the Four Chaplains. There's a great story that I think you were provided in your folders about it. I won't get into it in great length, but it's a historic event In the armed forces, we're 4 chaplains of different denominations. Funny that we were just talking about that a few minutes ago. Chose to go down with their ship many, many years ago, and there is going to be a remembrance ceremony at Linden Ponds at the Derby Performing Arts Center there at 2 p.m. It'll be a speaking event, and I know that the Hingham Police Color Guard were invited. They will be there in attendance as well. And I heard as recently as going out the door today that our 8th District Congressman Stephen Lynch will also be present.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Chief. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for sitting through both presentations tonight. Members of the Advisory Committee, I found, speaking for myself, but I'm sure my colleagues would join, both presentations were highly informative. So we look forward to continuing to work with the Advisory Committee with respect to the school budget, as well as the other warrant articles that we'll be debating and voting on at town meeting at the end of April. And on that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Good night, everyone.
I will also take a motion to adjourn from the Advisory Committee.